Hurricane season is a time to be vigilant and prepared for potential storms to come our way. The KPRC2 Storm Tracker team is taking you on a journey to help you get ready for the months ahead. The KPRC2 Hurricane and Flood Survival Guide.
Thank you for joining us. I'm KPRC2 Chief Meteorologist Frank Billingsley. June 1st marked the beginning of the Atlantic hurricane season, so we're in it from now until the end of November. Houston has seen its share of major storms. 2023 marks 40 years since Hurricane Alicia crashed ashore, causing wind and flooding damage throughout the Houston area. The storm hit the coast just 30 hours after it was named. 15 years ago, Hurricane Ike made landfall on Galveston Island as a Category 2 hurricane. It killed dozens of people, causing nearly $30 billion in damages. Well, this year, new technology is helping hurricane hunters refine their forecast. We'll take you along. Throughout the hour, we're helping you prepare for storms and for flooding outside tropical systems. We're taking a look at what's causing unexpected changes in flood insurance rates, and we're letting you know what needs to be in every hurricane kit and how to make sure your home and every member of your family is safe. We're also looking to the future at projects underway to reduce the impacts when Houston gets heavy rain or a tropical system. So let's jump in. Here's Anthony Yanez with a look at how hurricanes form.
Hurricane season is from June 1st to November 30th, with the peak activity when these ocean monsters really get going is mid-September. But for a hurricane to look like this, certain elements need to be in place. Come down here with me. It all starts with one drop of rain, one lone thunderstorm above the ocean. Now, because of the spin of the earth, a circulation starts within this storm. But you've got to have the right ingredients to get beyond this point. To become a tropical storm or a hurricane, temperatures have to be 80 degrees. But it also has to be 80 degrees to at least 150 feet deep. Now, this is just the water. You also need the upper levels of the atmosphere to be colder than the ground. Air has to cool with height, like climbing a mountain. If there's an inversion or warmer temperatures above the ground, a storm will have a tough time getting organized. Now, the upper level winds need to be in the same speed, going in the same speed, and in the same direction from the ground to 5,000 feet. If upper level winds come from a different direction, that'll weaken or prevent a hurricane from forming. This is called wind shear. And during an El Nino summer, wind shear is a big factor. And one of the reasons this hurricane season is forecast for a lower than average or average storm total. But when everything is perfect, a hurricane will form and strengthen. These ingredients are like a car. You need good tires, good engine, and plenty of gas to make a tropical system go.
Thanks, Anthony. So here is the 2023 tropical season forecast. Keep in mind the average is for 14 named storms, 7 becoming hurricanes and 3 major. And that's where most of the forecasts are landing, more or less. 12 to 17 from NOAA, 5 to 9 becoming hurricanes, 1 to 4 major. And then Colorado State's at 15, 7, and 3. So far with Arlene, we have had 1 tropical storm, but no hurricanes. So 2023, the seasonal outlook can go either way. 30% for below normal, 30% for above normal, 40% for near average. The bottom line on this is not a landfall forecast. Keep in mind, 1 hurricane can change everybody's life. So what to do? Make your plans now. With more on the names, here's Camberell Marshall.
The National Hurricane Center is predicting a near average year, which means 12 to 17 named storms, 5 to 9 of them hurricanes. That means this list of 21 storms could be well used by the time it's all said and done. We had Arlene almost happen. We had Tropical Depression number 2 this past week. Tropical Depression 1 happened back in January. These storms' names are used every 6 years unless one of the storms is so significant that it's replaced. And that's the case with Harvey, Irma, Maria, and Nate, replaced this year by Harold, Idalia, Margot, and Nigel. Let's hope we don't get to Nigel this year. Now here's Caroline Brown to explain what El Nino is all about.
This year, we're expected to have an El Niño year, the first since 2019. But what does this mean? In a typical year, the warm waters stay in the western Pacific. But during an El Niño year, we have weaker trade winds and we see warm water just off the coast of South America. This warm water heats the air above it, which leads to a rising motion. This translates to higher winds into the Caribbean that tears apart tropical systems. So typically during an El Niño year, we have a less active tropical season. The one caveat this year is that we have very warm sea surface temperatures in the Atlantic, which would suggest a more active season. This is likely why the forecast is for a near average season. Frank?
High water and flooding covering Houston area roadways. We've seen it time and time again, especially in the last decade. TxDOT is taking on the challenge to build and improve roadways to make them more resilient. KPRC2's Justina Latimer shows us just how some of these projects will make driving safer during bad weather.
Well, Houston roadways are a work in progress, but some of the progress also includes flood mitigation. I spoke with Danny Perez with TxDOT about the improvements made over the years.
It's important to keep these roadways open, so we want to do our part to make sure we're keeping the roadways open and keep traffic moving.
Houston is vulnerable to hurricanes and tropical storms, and we've seen the impact heavy rain can have on streets and freeways. That's why flood mitigation is a priority for TxDOT.
It could be 3-4 inches of rain in a matter of hours, and that can inundate a system. So what we're doing with a lot of these projects is incorporating everything from more detention ponds, improved drainage, the pumps that we have out here.
The 610 West Loop 69 Southwest Freeway Interchange project is a great example of that. In addition to working on connector ramps, they have also added adequate drainage.
In many areas, we'll have detention ponds, but they were some older standards. What we're doing now is increasing that capacity so it can take on more water, but also that outflow when it goes into the main areas where it needs to drain off.
Perez says TxDOT is hoping drivers will also do their part.
What we see are folks are dumping things on the road. They're throwing cans, foam cups, all kinds of things on the roadway. That will clog a drain. That will keep that water from flowing properly. And the other thing too, if you do see high water and you run into that situation, avoid it.
And as the saying goes, turn around, don't drown. And for your traffic updates during a major weather event, be sure to visit clicktohouston.com.
Knowing your evacuation zone is one of the key parts of hurricane preparedness. Oh, this is a map of the Houston area flood zones. It's separated by zip codes into coastal, A, B, and C. There are also evacuation routes that are outlined here in red. So we know it's a lot to take in. So we've posted the map on clicktohouston.com so you can get a closer look. It's part of our digital hurricane survival guide.
Okay, so now let's talk about storm surge. Storm surge is one of those parts of a hurricane that a lot of folks don't think is as deadly as it is. Here's exactly what's happening. Is at normal sea level, you've got a surge from the ocean itself, not only just because of the waves pushing in, but because of the wind that's starting to press that up. Think about if you're in the bathtub and you move the water with your hand, you're creating a storm surge. So in a scenario where a hurricane is starting to push that water on land, the wind is now creating 3 feet above normal sea level. Once we get to 6 feet, now we're starting to see a scenario where it could be working its way into the interior of the home, into the garage, into the first floor. And then once we get above that to about 12 feet, now we're talking about the entire first floor that is underwater. This is a scenario that we saw during Harvey, and that's why folks had to scramble to get to the second floor and even try to break their way out of the top of their attic. So 0 to 3 feet, it's about as high as a toddler or a young child. 3 to 6 feet, that's basically most adults. And then obviously anything above that is where we're running into some serious trouble. Do not underestimate the power of a storm surge. This is one of the biggest killers in any hurricane scenario.
Being prepared means making sure your home is protected as well, but flood insurance is getting more complicated than in years past.
So even if you're in the high-risk zone, you could be paying less than somebody that's in the low-risk zone.
What you need to check right now about your policy. And over the past few years especially, we've seen a change in hurricane and flood events in Southeast Texas. There's science behind the shift. We're breaking down the relationship between climate and weather next. And throughout the hour, we'll be testing your knowledge about hurricanes and preparations. Our first question asks, what's the biggest threat from hurricanes for people living inland? The correct answer, just 2 minutes away. Did you get the correct answer for tonight's first trivia question? We asked you the major threat from hurricanes for people living inland. The correct answer is flooding. When hurricanes move over land, they lose wind strength but continue to drop massive amounts of rain. It's a fact that a warming climate produces stronger and more frequent tropical storms. The KPRC2 Storm Tracker team has been closely following this trend. Here's meteorologist Caroline Brown with what we've seen.
Let's start with the simple fact. Our Earth is getting warmer. Take a look at global temperature trends. We've been increasing. Since 1970 to now, our global temperature on average has increased by 2.5 degrees. In fact, last year, 2022, that was the 6th hottest year on record. When you have warmer temperatures, you get more intense rainfall. For every 1 degree Fahrenheit, our atmosphere can hold 4% more moisture. That means thunderstorms can give you more rainfall, and we've seen that here in the Houston area. When it comes to warm temperatures, that is what hurricanes need to thrive. A warmer sea surface temperature allows hurricanes to go through rapid intensification, and we've seen this in recent years. Our hurricanes are getting stronger. So here's the takeaway. A warmer ocean increases hurricane strength. Also, with warmer air, we're seeing heavier downpours and more room for flooding. Finally, rising sea levels brings more intense storm surge and increases the threats of coastal flooding.
The KPRC2 Storm Tracker Hurricane app is ready for what hurricane season may bring. Scan the QR code you see here to download it. The app features easy access to live streams while storms are active. It also makes it easy to add storm pins and get a one-click look at this year's hurricane and flood survival guide. Whether you're evacuating or staying during a hurricane or tropical storm, you need to make plans for every member of the family. Coming up, we're taking a look at what you should be doing now to make sure your pets are prepared when it's go time. Plus, I'm going to take you to UTMB, which was inundated by Hurricane Ike floodwaters. What are they doing to make sure they are protected against that? Well, I'll show you what this is all about straight ahead. Stay with us. Here's a trivia question to think about. What was the first tropical storm to have its name retired before reaching hurricane status? Well, here's a hint. It hit southeast Texas in 2001 and caused a lot of damage in the Houston area. The answer is up in 2 minutes. So, what was the first tropical storm to have its name retired? It's Allison, which hit the Houston area in 2001. It dropped more than 80% of our average yearly rainfall in just a few days. It also flooded nearly 100,000 cars, was responsible for 41 deaths, and caused $5 billion in damage. 15 years ago, Hurricane Ike was born, moving across the Atlantic toward Cuba, across Cuba, and then into the Gulf of Mexico. Hurricane Ike would spend 3 days pushing water toward the Texas coast, known as the storm surge. It went right into Bolivar and decimated the peninsula. The seawall on the east end of Galveston did a pretty good job of protecting much of the area, at least toward the seawall. The problem was Ike went into the bay, and those north winds started to push bay water back toward the island. So a second storm surge came in on the order of 9 to 14 feet, anywhere from the wharf to Post Office Street. And one of those places that got hit so hard, the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, a jewel on the island. And a lot of people thought that UTMB would never come back.
We didn't have electricity, water wasn't available, and then there were blowers everywhere throughout the facility. And I think two major things that is different from Ike. One is we spend over $1 billion to actually build our infrastructure.
Okay, Russ, this is the emergency plan developed since Ike. I know it's all there, but what realistically are the utilities you have to keep UTMB running during and after a hurricane?
Good question, Frank. So let me show you what we have on the floor here. So it's chill water, it's power, it's domestic water for drinking, and it's steam. So what you're looking at here is a chiller that produces about 14,000 tons an hour that gets distributed to our building.
This is one of 2 water chillers that was completed in 2017. And if you're wondering, could this area flood? Not likely. This building was built high. In fact, where I'm standing is 32 feet above sea level.
We're monitored 24/7. This is where we actually monitor the oversight of the production equipment, the chill water, the steam, and so forth.
So there is plenty of chilled water, hot water, steam, electricity, and on top of that, 1 million gallons of drinkable water ready to go. Okay, Russ, during Ike, you all lost these elevators because the water surged in here. That set you back. What are you doing to make sure that doesn't happen again?
Good question, Frank. So these elevators here support John Silly Hospital, and this is our main transport for patients up and down the hospital. So what we do prior to hurricane season, we conduct preventive maintenance on our flood panels, and I'm going to show you what a flood panel is.
Okay.
So what do we do to keep the water out of the elevators?
Oh, wow. So the wall's open. Pull back. Let's pull that across. That high, how high? I guess this is about 7 feet high?
It's a little over 6 foot, so this will protect us up to about an 18-foot storm surge.
It's one thing to build new and build high to protect yourself from floodwaters, but what do you do with existing structures? Here's what you do. You build a 3-foot wide, 20-foot tall concrete barrier to surround this entire facility. And by the way, this concrete wall goes 10 feet down into the ground. So do you feel like we're ready at UTMB for the next hurricane?
As ready as we can be, I think, and much better than during Ike.
UTMB brings nearly $5 billion and 5,000 jobs to the state of Texas. So you can imagine during storms, it's critical that the infrastructure stays operational. Just the mention of a tropical system or potential flood event can cause anxiety for many in the Houston area who remember past storms. But there are ways to manage your feelings and stay clear-headed while you prepare. We'll show you how coming up. Plus, from the basics to the advanced class, we've got 3 items everyone needs in their hurricane preparedness kit that most folks don't think about until a storm approaches. And here's a trivia question for you to think on. Should you open your windows when a hurricane approaches? We'll have the answer and the reasons for it in just a couple of minutes. We ask you whether you should open your windows when a hurricane approaches, and the answer is a resounding no. It's actually a dangerous myth that opening windows will help equalize pressure in your house when a hurricane approaches. Instead, opening the windows can let wind, water, and debris inside. And when air enters with significant force, like during a hurricane, it can actually blow the roof off your home or cause major structural damage. So keep the windows tightly sealed. The beginning of hurricane season, before there are any storms forming, is a good time to check your flood insurance policy. Make sure you don't let it lapse. You may think your premium is high now, but investigator Amy Davis has a warning about how much you may have to pay if you skip a year.
Car insurance, home insurance, with just about everything, we can expect rates to go up every year. Flood insurance is no different. But FEMA already knows what your rate will be for years into the future. You can get that rate to help you plan and save yourself some money.
Houston is prone to flooding. We know that. Historically, if you purchased a home in a flood zone, a high-risk area, you knew your flood insurance would cost more than if you lived in an area with lower flood risk. Forget all that.
There's some weird things that they're looking at now that have nothing to do with what zone you live in.
Leash U is the president of Agency U, an insurance brokerage in West University. U says FEMA now considers how much it will cost to rebuild your home when deciding how much to charge you for flood insurance, even though the maximum payout to anyone is $250,000.
The way that I look at that is that's FEMA in the government's way of equalizing the cost and spreading it across everybody else. Because they think that somebody that lives in a $2 million home should be able to afford more of the premium than somebody that lives in a $250,000 home.
It means FEMA raised rates for many homes that have never flooded and lowered rates for homes that have. Take a look. You don't get more high risk for flooding than Galveston Island. But you found flood insurance rates here decreased an average of 41%. One home's rate was $10,579 a year, and it's now just over $1,400. Compare that with homes in Woodland Heights that are not high risk, where rates increased an average of 249%. The average homeowner here paid $527 a year. The new rate is about $2,000 a year. But here's the thing, you won't see that increase all at once. FEMA will raise your premium by 18% every year as long as there's no disruption to your policy until you finally reach that new $2,000 rate.
And there's a term for that. They call it the glide path. You know, you can glide into the new rating system.
But miss a payment or fail to renew your policy on time, and your rate will see that huge increase all at once when you start your policy again.
You immediately have to experience the new rate. And by the way, that's happening almost every single day. We get phone calls, oh my gosh, I forgot to pay.
If you want to know what your premium would be if you had to start a new policy, you can call any insurance broker and ask for the price of a new flood policy on your home. You should also know that if you're buying a new home, you can ask the seller to transfer their flood policy to you. That will allow you to be grandfathered into the lower rate with just an 18% increase each year instead of starting at what may be a super high new premium. I'm Amy Davis, KPRC 2 News.
Hurricane hunters fly into the storm to make sure you have the information you need when a hurricane forms.
It's the most dynamic flying in the world. I can't think of any other type of flying that is as challenging, as fun, as rewarding.
We're heading inside these cutting-edge planes to show you just how everything works to get you the most up-to-date details. And on the ground, emergency officials are standing ready to go into high alert as soon as a storm is detected.
Everybody has the mindset it's not going to happen to me. And you know what? It does.
The massive operation involved in making sure you get the information you need as a storm approaches. Here's a tricky trivia question for you. True or false? As long as you have a cell phone, you'll be able to communicate with the family during and after a storm. We'll have the correct answer on the other side of the break. Just a moment ago, we asked if this sentence is true or false. It's false. Communication networks could be unreliable during and after a storm. Make sure you write down important numbers and designate an out-of-town contact to help your family reconnect and plan a meeting spot. They're called the Hurricane Hunters, a group of men and women who fly into storms gathering valuable information. This data is used to make a forecast track more accurate. Meteorologist Anthony Yanez took a tour of the planes and how they work.
In flight school, pilots are trained to avoid the red, to stay away from storms. But the hurricane hunters seek out the red with the goal of making a better forecast.
I think the best word maybe is dramatic, right? Like you're in the intense heat of battling this storm.
Commander Adam Abitbull is one of two pilots in the cockpit of the WP-3D Orion, a 4-engine turboprop. This plane is a moving lab with 3 radars on board. The black M&M-looking radar at the bottom of the plane horizontally scans a storm, while the rear radar vertically slices a storm. This cross-section is almost like getting an MRI of a hurricane.
So this opens here, the sonde goes in here, we'll close it up, and then it just launches out the bottom of the aircraft.
Jenna Hemphill is what's called a load master. She has one job, dropping about 20 of the 16-inch drop sondes from the WC-130J.
So in real time, it'll be telling us wind speed, direction, temperature, relative humidity, and pressure, and we'll all get it on this computer here.
While the idea of flying into the turbulence of a hurricane may make your stomach spin, the stadium effect of seeing the eye makes the tossing worth it. Inside the eye, it's always smooth, but you never know what the flight into the eye is going to be like.
They all have their different personalities. Some that you think would be crazy turbulent are pretty smooth, and then some you kind of look and go, oh, it doesn't look like much, and it shakes you around pretty good. So you just got to be on your toes with all of them.
The hurricane hunters fly into a storm in what's called an alpha pattern, an X, or triangles. The flight information gathered goes directly into the weather models and has increased accuracy 25%, reducing forecast track errors by 40 miles a day.
It's the most dynamic flying in the world. I can't think of any other type of flying that is as challenging, as fun, as rewarding as flying in a hurricane.
Did you know that the first flight into a hurricane happened right here in Southeast Texas? It was Bryan College Station, 1943. Major Joe Duckworth was training British pilots on how to fly with instruments only. There was a storm in the Gulf of Mexico, and the British pilots were talking about the superiority of the British planes compared to the American planes. Well, the Major was having none of that, so he bet that he could fly into a hurricane using instruments only. The bet was on. He was successful and thus started the beginning of the Hurricane Hunter program.
The start of hurricane season is a reminder, of course, that all of us should be prepared. For this region's emergency operations teams, those plans are very much already in place. Because the greater Houston region is more than 10,000 square miles, the coordination of the emergency management partners is key. Transtar is a center for Harris County operations, a place where you most often see news conferences during times of emergency. Brian Murray is the Assistant Deputy Coordinator for Homeland Security and Emergency Management, and says while the Operations Center may be quiet on a good day, that can change very quickly.
First of all, anytime a storm enters the Gulf of Mexico, a named storm, we will activate immediately to level 3, which is increased readiness.
If the situation is more urgent, all of the 88 stations seen here will be filled by local, state, and federal stakeholders who work to keep residents informed and hopefully safe. The key, he says, is to not be surprised and keep a watchful eye on the Atlantic and the Gulf all season long.
Anything that forms in and around the Bay of Campeche down by the Yucatan, that's another place that we get more concerned about, because really once a storm is in the Gulf, it's like a pinball. It can go anywhere.
All of this we can move around.
The city of Houston has its own Office of Emergency Management. Chief Thomas Munoz is the Deputy Director and Emergency Management Coordinator. He says 120 hours is their triggering timeline, and they do exercises with all of the city's department heads to prepare.
So basically at 120 hours with potential landfall to us, we start planning with all the city departments, with the stakeholders, just start double checking, triple checking everything you have, your plans, your equipment. In the event something happens, and that gives us a checkoff list.
Both organizations stay in constant contact with each other, exchanging information and coordinating responses they say the public can trust and use now and during emergencies.
You know, our motto has always been we'd rather be accurate than first. So if we're sending something out to the public, if we're saying something from behind the podium or in a spot interview, we're giving you information that's been vetted.
Take your time, think of the what if, right? What if something is happening? Where do I go? What do I do? And more importantly, look at the information we push out. How do you start getting ready? Where can you go if you don't have those means?
Everybody has the mindset it's not going to happen to me. And you know what? It did. It does.
As you can see, the emergency responders say they are ready for the season ahead. It is up to all of us to do our parts to be ready as well. Frank?
Thank you, Cambrell. So now we know what officials are doing to keep everyone safe, but what should you be doing? Right now, before any storms come our way, you need to make sure you have the essentials. Here's Caroline Brown to help you get started with your hurricane kit.
There's the basics. You need to have enough water for your family, food, of course, you need to have ways to get power, and a flashlight is always a fantastic idea. Also, make sure you gather up important documents like passports, birth certificate, a handwritten contacts list, and medications. You want to make sure you also think about the kids and the pets, blankets and toys, always a fantastic idea. But today, I want to talk about some items you may not have thought about. Come with me. We're here at H-E-B, where the shelves are stocked. This is the best time to prepare before a storm while all the essentials are still there. As we wandered the aisles, we decided to put some customers to the test, and their answers were on the ball. What do you think should be in a hurricane safety kit?
Water, food, dry canned food, paper towels, toilet paper, ice, medicines. That's what I can think of.
Yep, those are the essentials, but other important items tend to get overlooked. During Hurricane Harvey, there was a rush to the grocery stores. One of the first items to sell out, that was actually coolers. It's a great idea to have a cooler in your hurricane toolkit because it can keep your food safer for longer if your power goes out. Remember, your hurricane kit should also be ready for the days after the storm. For instance, if you have a grill, remember to stock up on charcoal or propane.
You need a medical first aid, and you're always gonna need your way to start a fire, like a flint kit, something type on the survivalist. You're gonna need something to cut, some light, some water, some you never pretty much know what you're gonna need until you need it. Things happen and you just kind of got to be prepared for everything.
And prepare for when the sun comes back out. Take it from me, being a redhead, sunscreen is a great thing to have in your hurricane preparedness kit. Often after a storm, it can be buggy and hot for several days. Above all, build your kit early. Do you typically prepare things beforehand, or do you wait until you hear of a potential storm?
It's better to prepare way before, especially with water, especially because when you go to the store and there's a hurricane coming, you can't find anything.
So you've made sure your house is covered in case of damage, you know your evacuation route, and you have your hurricane kit if you decide to ride out the storm. So do you have a plan for your pets? Whether you decide to stay or go during a storm, you need to make sure you prepare your four-legged friends as well. So let's check in with KPRC2's Lisa Hernandez at the Houston SPCA.
That's right. We are here at the Houston SPCA talking everything pet preparedness. This hurricane season is so important. Let's bring in Julie Kenso with the Houston SPCA. Thank you for your time and your expertise. Let's get to your checklist. So important to know these things.
Yes, and you mentioned that checklist. That can be found on HoustonSPCA.org. The full entire list, but let's get to it. Make sure you have a crate that your pet is accustomed to. Throw some treats in there. Right. Evacuating is not the time to get your pet acclimated, especially with your cat. Creature comforts. Collar and tag. Please make sure that all of your pets have a collar and a microchip. That's really, really important that that information is up to date. Of course, you're going to need their medication, and the storm that's approaching, it's not a time to hurry, scurry, and get that out of the way. Yeah. And then most important is their vaccination record.
Those records will be needed in the event you need to board your animal away from the storm or take them with you to a pet-friendly hotel. Also on the list, collapsible bowls, treats, 2 weeks worth of pet food, and bottled water. And don't forget a crate. It'll be the safest way to transport if you evacuate.
We never know when it's going to happen. So why not just have it? Because if anything, this is a good spot for your dog to just kind of like get out, whether it's noise for the 4th of July or, you know, preparing for an emergency.
Her last bit of advice, make a plan for your pet. Never leave your animal behind in a storm. She remembers the rescues and tragedies from Harvey.
Once the water started to slowly subside, we're talking day 5 here, we had people, a flood of calls, frantically calling us. We left, we knew it'd be back right away because the water always goes down. We know the water didn't go back down. We were out in boats with law enforcement and breaking into people's homes because their pets had been there 5, 6, 7 days.
The message this hurricane season and always, never abandon your animals. Devise a plan now before it's too late.
And this also applies to farm animals, livestock. You can't roll a trailer in when the water's already up. Okay, make some phone calls, make your connections, create a network where you know that you can haul your animals away long before that first couple of drops are falling, because you know what? It's better to be safe than what happened in Hurricane Harvey, and that truly is a tragedy. Make sure that you've got a place for them in advance, because a pending storm, you know, everybody's going to be calling. So go ahead and get rid of that. Get rid of that task right now, and you'll be glad that you did.
Okay, Julie, thank you so much for all your knowledge, for the complete checklist, HoustonSPCA.org, and we also have that information on our website anytime to click to Houston.com. Thank you, Julie.
Giving you the tools you need to prepare for hurricane season means more than protecting your physical well-being and your belongings. Mental health is a huge part of the equation as well. After the past few years, many people may be feeling powerless, but there are ways to empower yourself and build your confidence. Here's KPRC2 health reporter Haley Hernandez to help you get started.
Houstonians' mental health has been greatly impacted since 2017. We had lots of flooding, Hurricane Harvey, and then the pandemic. The thought of another storm season upon us can have many feeling anxious.
It doesn't take a whole lot of rain for that to really, trigger you.
Dr. Suarez, professor and chair of psychiatry at UT Health Houston, explains techniques to relieve stress this hurricane season. Examples include breathing exercises, relaxation techniques, practicing mindfulness, avoid drugs and alcohol, limit caffeine, and...
So having a good routine, giving yourself enough sleep, regular exercise.
Exercise is well known to benefit your physical health, but never underestimate how it can also lessen depression, anxiety, and improve your overall wellness. If a storm does come towards us, a certain level of anxiety is normal and a natural way to keep you safe. For example, getting nervous driving in the rain.
There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's just being wise and prudent, primarily if you've seen firsthand, when it doesn't go well. But if that's something paralyzing you, preventing you from doing things that you'd like to do, or let's say, you'd get terrified for a few days and you couldn't do your job, I would say, well, that needs to be carefully looked at, because we might be talking about, some full-blown PTSD that needs treatment there.
And if you were someone who witnessed the storm firsthand, either you had to work outside in it or you had a home or car flooded, you're more likely to feel symptoms of PTSD. I'm health reporter Haley Hernandez, KPRC 2 News.
This hour, we've given you the broad strokes, but every person, every family is unique when it comes to preparing for tropical and flooding events. So now we want to hear from you. Our panel of experts is answering your questions about preparedness and hurricane season up next.